I literally grow channels for a living. And so when I saw your numbers, I was like, damn, Keith is cooking.
The richest people right now aren't paying attention to this because they're rich and they don't have to.
You said you had a very unique experience of growing up around the children or grandchildren of billionaires.
I have spent years gathering the research and understanding exactly what's happening here, and I've found a generational opportunity that I am now packaging up for people to be able to come and participate in. You know, Trump decided he launched his meme coin, so also like a week after that, the SEC said, oh, meme coins are fine, by the way, like this is not a problem anymore. This world that we're moving into where meme coins are going to be treated as a real financial instrument is wild.
What's going on, you three legends? Welcome back to the show. Today we're sitting down with Keith D, an educator and a creator who talks all about how money works and how the top 1% understands that money operates on a specific set of rules that you and I typically don't know. And because of that, they're able to get incredibly wealthy, stay incredibly wealthy, and increasingly get even more wealthy. That's why there's such a massive gap in the wealth distribution in the entire world. And we mostly don't get to hear about these subjects because they're hidden behind deliberately confusing language. But now, luckily, there's people like Keith that are taking the time to go learn and understand these concepts and distill it into videos that are easy to consume for people like you and I, people that aren't really rich, that aren't experts. And because of that, his YouTube channel has absolutely exploded. In less than 2 months, he has amassed over 66,000 subscribers and counting because he's sharing the stuff that you need to know. The things that are changing, the systems that are there that people are taking advantage of that we don't even know about. He breaks these things down and he explains them in a way that is incredibly approachable. So if you think you can understand money better and you want to take advantage of the changes that are happening right now with the financial system and with crypto, this episode is for you. Keith is a wealth of knowledge. He's incredibly humble and he gives you exactly what you need in the way that you need it, in a way that you can actually comprehend it and go right to application to change your life in a tangible way. I say this almost every episode because it's just true every time. This was one of the most fun conversations that I've had in so long, and it was so impactful on me, and I know it will be on you. You're gonna get so much out of this. So get your notepad out, get ready to watch this entire episode. You will be incredibly happy that you did so. Let's get right into it and hear from Keith. Boom, we're going. Keith, how are you?
Incredible, man. Today's one of the best days of my life. How about yourself?
I love to hear that, man. So first of all, I got to ask why.
All right, so you ready for this?
I'm ready.
I woke up this morning, right? You still there?
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the coldest way to start an episode. That's amazing. I love that. That was a great start. Okay, so yeah, case in point, I caught that through all of your videos that you over-index on optimism. So I would agree with that. I try to practice gratitude as much as I can, but clearly you're on a different level. Seeing as just waking up is getting you there. So I guess today's the best day for me too, man. But I'm super excited for this episode. There's so much stuff we're going to go over here, and this one's probably going to be a fairly long one. So if you're listening to this, you're watching this, buckle up, get your notepad out. Keith is going to hit you with so many bombs throughout this that I want you to take notes as you're listening, but also don't feel bad if you need to re-listen to things, because sometimes it takes hearing something 3 or 4 times before it really sinks in, especially with the topics that we're going to be talking about. Keith is an expert at this. It took him a long time to learn this stuff, and so it's going to probably take hearing it even from an expert 3 to 5, maybe even 10 times before it really clicks in your head. Would you agree with that? Oh
man, now I have to calculate every word that comes out of my mouth and make sure.
No, don't stress. No. The whole point of this is that it's supposed to be very conversational, because some of these topics for a lot of people are fairly dry and they're intimidating, but you do such a good job of presenting them. So just present them exactly as you are on your channel. And for the person watching it, if you need to watch a few times, just do that. But I want to take this back, man, to your story, because your story is super unique. Like I said before we started recording, I've been lurking you. I've been like a stalker the past few weeks, getting ready for this episode, watching every video you've ever posted. And you have a really cool and unique story. One of the first key points that I saw was what is the inflection point? Because for someone to come like you, there's usually some sort of catalyst for that. Like there's some reason why you went this way, probably a multitude of things. But for you, you said you had a very unique experience of growing up around the children or grandchildren of billionaires. Can you explain to me that whole thing?
Yeah. Okay, so grew up, I guess, rather fortunate, and I definitely can say that. And with that, I had parents that wanted me to be in private schools, right? And I understood the value of that as a kid, or that rather, my parents were working hard to make sure that that was possible. And there was two sides to that. First thing was like, I didn't like seeing my parents having to work as hard as they were for, for what may have seemed normal to other people. And just in general, I felt like, there's a lot of stress that came with the work that they were doing. And it was a question of like, is what they're doing worth what they're giving me? Right. Like they're doing all of this for me. And, I just was very grateful for the fact that they were sacrificing so much for me to do what they wanted me to do, or what they thought would give me a better life. And so there's two sides to that story from that regard, because first off, I was very grateful for what my parents were doing, and I recognized what they were doing. And then on top of that, now I'm in the school and I'm seeing, like you mentioned, the grandchildren of billionaires. And in a lot of cases, the kids of many different multi-millionaires. It was like, imagine the school is like, 80% of the kids are all the kids of millionaires. And, another 10% is straight up the kids or grandchildren of billionaires and multi-billionaires, multi-deca billionaires. And so from that, like I said, I was aware of this. Even in middle school. So I went to the middle school first, and then we went to this high school. And I know that this isn't like some uncommon story. Like a lot of people in America have had this experience. And, we were sitting in the pickup line in middle school one day, and one of my best friends, the other 10% of the people that aren't necessarily like that at all. And one day, we see like, Bentleys coming through the pickup line, and we're just talking to each other, and we're just like, this is crazy. Like, like we didn't grow up around this, like, but to them, like no one else is paying attention to this. We're just like sitting here talking to each other like, yo, like what is going on here? And, anyways, so things like that. I remember one day in high school, there was a 918 in the parking lot, a 918 Porsche Carrera, which is like $1 million car. And so one day, like me and the same friend are the only ones who were just like, wait a minute, like that's $1 million car that's just sitting in the parking lot of this school. And, just like little things like that kind of start to open your mind to like, okay, this is normal to them, and on top of that, I go a little bit deeper on the channel about how, although you see some of this stuff, the real thing that was most interesting is you see a lot of that stuff. You see the stuff from the people that are millionaires. Mm-hmm. But then the whole school was built by a man who was a multi-billionaire, and you didn't see him in a fancy car or wearing nice clothes or anything like that. This guy's worth billions and billions of dollars. And the big lesson that I like to take away from that is that, that level of wealth is not something that you can really see. It's something that's completely invisible. And so that's kind of like some background of the things that I experienced growing up at this school. Like I said, I know it's not overly unique, but I definitely was very cognizant of it as it was happening.
I think that's the unique part, is that a lot of people, when they're just in the situation, whatever the normal is for them, they don't think about it beyond just the normalcy. They just say, this is what the day-to-day looks like. This is the colors, the shapes, the sounds, the objects, and they just move through almost robotic. And I had when I saw your video where you were talking about that, I resonated with it so much, because I grew up in a town where we were like upper middle class, definitely not hurting financially by any stretch of the imagination, but we were surrounded by wealth that was just like orders of magnitude different. And I'd go to some of these people's houses, and I had one friend in particular who the dad was like, had a one-to-one call with Bill Gates. He was an executive at Microsoft at the time, and we'd have to be quiet because he was talking to Bill, and it was just like a different world, right? And for me, I know that I think what separated my life trajectory, besides apart from like anyone else that I ever met, was that I was so curious all the time, which is like the thesis of this show, is stay curious. So where did that come from in you? Obviously you saw that this was an opportunity and one that you wanted to seize, but like where did that come from? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, all of it came from seeing my parents work so hard. And I was like, first off, I don't want them to have to work like that. And I also never want to be in that position either. So, I'm 15, 16, and I'm like, I got to figure this out. Because if I don't start now, then, I'm going to get stuck on the path of going through this life of just working really hard for someone else and having to do that just to take care of myself and my family. And so, online right? That's the beauty of our generation, right? Is we just have this internet thing where we can go and learn whatever, right? It's crazy.
It's insane. And I think that although it's talked about all the time and people like you and I echo this endlessly, there's some sort of vibrational match or mismatch with people where it just doesn't sink in. Like back in the day, and this is also, I had so many issues with my grandparents because when we used to educate online, I've been creating content for nearly a decade at this point. And I remember when I first started doing it, they were looking at me and genuinely said, like, are you an egomaniac? Why would anyone care to listen to what you have to say? And I was like, they just don't get it. Like back in the day, you needed someone to tell you what you could and couldn't do. You needed someone to open the door. That door doesn't even exist anymore, but people still don't walk through it.
Dude, that right there. That right there. Because, I'm growing up in the South and, unfortunately, there's a lot of things about that I knew were going to hold me back from being able to be super successful in business. So I said, wait a minute, there's this internet thing where no one cares what I look like. No one even knows what I look like per se. I can run up an e-commerce store and people don't know that there's some 16-year-old little kid that's behind this. So, I went full on at that. I was doing affiliate marketing offers. I was doing like e-commerce stuff, just like getting my feet wet, trying to learn these platforms. But that was the thing that was in my head. I was like, even with my friends and stuff at this school, like I would go and I would talk to their parents and I would say like, hey, like I'm trying to learn about like business and stuff. Like, can I talk to your dad? Like stuff like that. And, but online, I'm like, hey, no one knows what I look like. So, and they don't know that, anyways. So we'll talk some more about that stuff because it gets relevant as to how this YouTube channel has blown up, I think. But for now, what I really wanted to say is just like, I knew that that I could use the internet because no one knew what I looked like and that would give me an advantage in business. So,
Totally.
So yeah, and that curiosity was just always from the perspective of how do I get my parents out of that situation and make sure that I never have to go through that as well.
Totally. Yeah, it makes complete sense. First of all, shout out to your parents. That's incredibly commendable to sacrifice for your child like that. And also huge shout out to you because that happens all the time and kids don't even realize it's taking place. So that's a testament to your ability to observe and be empathetic and get into their situation. So amazing and not shocking to see where you are given that thought process. And I had the same sort of experience. I was always so curious, so much to the point where I actually would sometimes piss people off. Like I would always understand. I'd go into these rooms and I played rep hockey. I played rep football, which was in Canada, it's like travel sports. And I was lucky enough that my dad was able to afford for me to play. But with that, you're with a certain amount of people that can afford that because it was a very expensive thing, especially hockey. And so I would always ask these people how they made their money. I'd be the only kid in the room with all these adults, and I'd say like, how did you do this? What do you do? Can you explain it to me? And I would ask so many questions where my dad would literally be like, okay, Ben, like go back with the other kids. And I did the same stuff with you, like you, man. I started side hustles when I was so young. I actually found this Chinese supplier called DHgate. And I was ordering and selling knockoff jerseys and hats and selling them around the school. I would send a paper around the school and tell it like, what jersey do you want and the size? And I'd send it around the whole school. And then at the end, I would order them all directly from China. And then I'd ship them, I'd give them around the school. And my dad wouldn't let me use his credit card. So I had to use my friend's mom's credit card. So shout out to Barb. She was an absolute legend. And she funded my little side hustle. So I totally can sympathize with that. And it was so fun doing all that stuff. And I always try to push people into that because it's so empowering when you create something from nothing, right? When you take a concept or an idea or a desire and you manufacture money just from something as dumb as me figuring out that knockoff jerseys were cheaper if you go directly to China and the other person was too lazy to figure that out. So we're both happy. I sell them something way below retail for like 50 or 60 bucks, whatever. And I bought it for 20, and I'm over the moon about it. What were your first side hustles? So you mentioned drop shipping. Like what were the first ones that you worked on and what did you learn?
Yeah. Man, the very first offer, this was crazy. I think I was either 15 or 16 and somehow I heard about like Bing ads because at the time that's what people were using. They were using Bing.
Like the browser, right?
Yeah. Well, like the search engine, search engine
right.
at the time. So yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, and I heard of ClickBank. So I went to ClickBank and I found a little offer. It was like a recurring revenue thing. I think maybe that sparked in my mind. It's like recurring revenue is great.
Do you remember the offer?
It was like a tattoo stencil offer. It's like you would like pay to get access to a library of tattoos and then you would download them and bring them to your yeah, it's crazy, bro. I was like, I didn't think anything of the offer. Just, I saw it was performing. That's what it was.
Yeah, of course.
And then so I literally just took the link, put it into the Bing ad, and like created some headline and ran the ad. And the first day I made a sale from that.
Let's go. That's a huge moment.
That first sale, right? That
First
sale,
dollar, man. Yeah.
it changes everything.
It actually does, dude. It's like I always use video game analogies. It's like you're given like a cheat code after that, where you're like, oh wow, like this is or when you're playing a game, and I just finished playing this game that I love from my childhood called Jack and Dexter, and the follow-up game is Jack 2, and you get given regions at different time depending on your progress. You get opened up to more of the map. There's nothing like getting your first dollar online in terms of opening up the map.
For real, man. Yeah. From that point forward, I was like, whoa, like this is real.
So what's the evolution after that? When you get the offer, you make your first dollar. Where do you go from there?
So first off, that offer petered out. That was probably the only sale I made. But
okay,
right, I was
still a big one.
That was the biggest thing that could have happened, like for me to just get that one sale, because I'm like, oh, this is a real thing. I can make money online. From there, I move on into more e-commerce, so like selling physical products. And it's funny because this idea actually came from my mom. I was like looking at AliExpress and stuff, and DHgate I'm familiar with, man. I kind of forgot about that one, but that was like the other one at the time.
Man, did you ever message with the suppliers there? That was always the funniest thing. like God love them, they were amazing, but AI didn't exist back then, so their English was incredibly broken, and I'd have to I got so good at speaking broken English. Like I would read a message and my friend was like, "What are they saying?" And I'm like, "Oh, he means this, this, and this." It was awesome.
Right. Yeah, dude. And that ended up really, doing that kind of stuff would be the real opportunity back in the day. I mean, DHgate, I think that was built into the system, but even on AliExpress and stuff, like actually trying to have conversations with people could change the whole dynamic of everything you're doing, because you really never know how big or how small these people are and how much they're willing to do to help you get to your next step in your business. Mm-hmm. But anyways, so yeah, I found like this, there was like prayer beads, and that was like a product that was selling really well. And then from there, I threw up some offers, had some e-commerce sites. I had like several different brands around the same product, and it was hitting. It was like I had this software that I would run. It was called Instagress at the time. And what you would do is it was basically AI. I realized this the other day. I'm like, this was kind of AI. You would like give it a bunch of messages that you could comment on people's stuff, and you could like target people's pages and like the likes that they had. And it would go through and it would find people that followed these pages and liked this content and comment on their stuff and say, hey, you can get this, blah, 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 in the link in our bio. And I would just have that running all day. I'd have like 10, 20 accounts just running, doing that all day. And then I'm, making sales on these e-commerce stores. And I kind of forgot what the question was, but that was kind of how things started to evolve.
Man, there's just so many similarities in our story. So one of my biggest service offerings for my agency that I still run to this day, that I started like 7 or 8 years ago, was an Instagram agency where I would do exactly that. The bot that I was using was Follow Meter, or Follow Liker, I think it was called. And so essentially what I would do is I'd go to all of these businesses. I didn't how you did it is smarter than how I did it. I went and sold it as a service to all of these local businesses. And this was before Instagram really had the sophistication that it does now for cracking down on things like this. Right. So you could just go ham back in the day. It was crazy. You could grow in a concentrated way by posting nothing. And people followed back then as well. Right. So I would go into these businesses, be like, it's $500 per month. And I was growing them with targeted followers like 300 plus a week. And these people were like, this is crazy. It was honestly a cheat code, and it kind of felt like it wasn't real. And then as soon as Instagram got sophisticated enough, it no longer is. But it was just a different time. And I think that one of the biggest things that I've found across everyone who does stuff like this is that they don't wait to be told something's a good idea. Right? Like if I looked at this, the app that I used was incredibly sketchy. Like people would have said it's too good to be true, all this stuff. But I just said, I know this works. I'm going to go do it. I don't need someone to tell me 4 different ways that it's going to work. Right? And so obviously you did the same thing for the drop shipping stuff. Yeah. I never sold physical products. So what was like how did that go? What was the process like with all that?
Yeah. So at first it was all just drop shipping from China. And then eventually I had a good product and brand that people were actually, liking. So I started to order it more in bulk and stuff like that. And then I have like these old videos of me on Instagram where I would like package this stuff up at school. Cause like at
Let's
school
go.
I had like a cutting board. I could like print stuff off. I'm like using all the resources that I can. And,
What was the product?
so this was like these spiritual bracelets. That was the one that
Okay, so the
first
same
really
thing.
took
Cool.
off for me. Yeah. And then so at that point, like, you know, the Instagram thing was doing well, but I'm like trying to figure out how to scale this stuff. So I start running Facebook ads and learning that whole game. At that time, it was like,
That was a beast back then too. That was not easy.
oh my goodness. It was hard, but it was also so much opportunity. Like I wish that
Yeah,
I
it was
had been
crazy.
older at that time.
Yes. I
'Cause
said that
it's
so many
like,
times.
That was legit.
It was crazy. Most people don't know this unless you're a business nerd like you and I. If you look at some of the massively successful startups over the past decade, they were just early on Facebook ads, man. Like they literally built their entire business off of that arbitrage opportunity. Real quick, yes, I'm going to be that podcast guy who begs for you to subscribe, but it's because I care about you. I want to make this show amazing. I want to bring on people that can help you thrive in a world that no one prepared you for. And if I don't have subscribers, I just simply can't get those people on to ask the questions that you want to hear. And so the best way that you can help me completely for free is just simply to click that subscribe button down below. It takes 2 seconds, costs you nothing, and it means the world to me. Thank you in advance for doing so. I love you. Let's get back into the conversation.
Facts, man. I ended up later working with these guys that started this company called JetSmarter. And they were like, he wasn't really one of the founders, but he was one of the people running their growth at that company. And like they went from like 2 people in a room to like 100+ employees getting, you know, big PE money and selling out for like hundreds of millions of dollars, all off of Facebook ads. Quite
Crazy,
frankly.
man. Yeah, if you've bought an opportunity, anyone listening to this, and you see like it's underpriced attention, you need to squeeze that thing like crazy because these things always get closed, and you'll always be like Keith and I here going back like, shit, I wish it was like that then. And there are people always think people are so pessimistic too. So the first thing you got to frame is to be more optimistic, like Keith did in the beginning. I'm still taken away by how you started that. That was freaking awesome. But if you don't come with that kind of perspective to an opportunity, you'll bring it down to your level. So when you spot something that is the holy grail, if you have a shitty mindset, the opportunity seems less significant. And there's so many opportunities. Like I can't tell you how many times I've come across people where they're like, oh, it's easy for you to say you started YouTube 10 years ago. And I'm like, bro, I thought YouTube was late then. Right? So those opportunities are still here now, and everyone's gonna say the same thing 5 years from now. So if you see it, freaking go, man. So I cut you off there. What were you saying next?
I kind of want to keep talking about that underpriced attention thing, because like I used to watch Gary Vee back in the day, and like I was a huge disciple of Gary Vee, and like now, like 10 years later, I'm like, wait a minute, like everything that he was saying was right.
Bro, I know, and I loved finding his stuff because I was like this from a very young age. Like I used to sell like soda out of my locker in like grade 6 and 7, and no one celebrated that back then. Like entrepreneurship has only recently become cool. Like Gary Vee and people seeing Zuck and whatever become celebrities through the vehicle of entrepreneurship is what made it cool. You were seen as like a sleazy salesman before that. And so I do have like a ton of respect for Gary because he got shit on so much that you and I can be cool now. Like it's actually pretty insane to think about that this really didn't exist back then. So I can totally agree with that. I remember finding Gary Vee when I was in high school. I got my iPhone 4 and I was sitting in my business class and I was like, I have all these ideas. I want to do all this stuff, but everyone around me thinks I'm a freaking weirdo for this. And I found one of his videos and I was just like, this guy gets it. But even I wasn't fully believing the things he was saying because I wasn't there vibrationally yet. How old were you when you found this kind of stuff, and how did it start shaping you into doing your own stuff?
Yeah, I would say I was about 16 when I found
so around
Gary
the same
Vee.
time.
Yeah, it was like just on the internet trying to find the information, right?
Yeah.
Like who's talking about what's going on? How can I use this information to change my situation?
Totally.
So he was a huge thought leader at that time, and I think you're totally right. It's kind of crazy to think about. I mean, he was pretty much that I can think of like the first person to really take it all the way as like this entrepreneur influencer guy on YouTube.
Man, I can't imagine how many times that guy got roasted by people that he probably once cared about their opinion to a degree, right? Of just saying this guy's such an idiot. And I had that too. I was called the podcast boy in like a negative way in college and like being roasted for carrying around my camera because I saw what no one else did, man. And then now I've had so many DMs from people that are worried that they're losing their job. And I was like, dude, I told you this was going to happen literally a decade ago. And you guys looked at me like I was an idiot and I was the weird kid. And sure, maybe I was in the minority, but sometimes the minorities see things others don't. And Gary did that, and having the conviction to scream that when everyone's calling you an idiot, quite commendable. And I think that's also where opportunities are found, is where others are unwilling to go or know that going there would make them look stupid. But how I get through that is I think about who would think I look stupid and do I care about their opinion in this realm of life? And it's almost never the case. Do you know what I mean? Like the people in your life that say don't do it, it's like, yeah, they wouldn't do it. And I don't really care about their opinion on this subject anyway. So why would I let it have any impact on where I go or what I do?
Right, right. You know, I've had to pretty much start going through this very recently because, like, you know, I'm a very private person for the most part, and I don't really like to put myself out there. So all of that has changed a lot for me over the past 30 days with this YouTube, which I'm sure we'll get to later.
Yeah, your YouTube's blowing up, man. Your YouTube is going crazy.
I had this guy reach out to me. His name is Kevin, and he's just been like basically mentoring me through this whole process. And he was kind of helping me to think about that. He was like, dude, like, you got to think about the people that are coming here and leaving these comments on your videos. Like, these people are people who are not doing this and who probably would never do what you're doing. And then the heart of where you're coming from, the heart of where I've been coming from with all of this has just been trying to teach people and just trying to get information out. So it's like, maybe I did said something wrong, or maybe I didn't do it perfectly, or maybe I look in a way that people don't want me to look, and like, that's fine, you know? So, you know, balancing this idea of like, you know, who is it that you're getting this feedback from? And then also like, where's your heart at and what are you trying to accomplish? Because in that case, you know, what they think really doesn't even matter that much.
Dude, completely. And I'm so glad to hear that you have someone to support you through that, because when you're going through it alone, it's really difficult. And I had many tough conversations with myself and no one to talk to, because no one in my zone could relate to this kind of stuff. And I really had to struggle internally. And in life, I've always been people call me brash, and some people really don't like me just because I'm pretty confident in who I am. And if someone's not in alignment with that, I'm not shy about saying that or letting my actions say that. And I've just found that every time I've ever suffered in my life, it's when I've not been acting as who I am, right? Like every time you think about when you're suffering, it's like, were you being who you know you should be? And it's almost always you were a little off base. And so with content, I think the fact that you've done so much work to get here, you're operating at a level of abundance that it sounds like a corny buzzword, but it's genuinely like an energy or a frequency that the average person who doesn't like their life, they can't understand that someone would give something away for free like this, right? Like they can't associate the fact that you are that content with what you've done that you genuinely want to give it to other people. That's one of the biggest things that I've battled with. Was your zone of genius is finances and business. Mine was always marketing. Like I knew the psychology of marketing and why people bought just intuitively from a very young age. I was just so damn good at this shit. And I look back at my life and I'm like, wow, like this was just a gift that I was given. And because it was coming from me, the people around me didn't see it as anything important, because they're like, why would you give this away if it's as valuable as you're saying? And then when I just started applying it for myself, then they're all like, shit, you were right. And it's so weird how you can only consume what you're at the level to receive. And so I'd love to hear that you got to this place, you're sharing it, and your videos, bro, like, not to toot your horn because you're here. I've said it to my girlfriend. I've said it to everyone who listens. Your videos are like some of the best that I've heard on the subjects that are really hard to talk about. So I want to, maybe this is a good time to segue into the things that you learned about the 1% that then led you into learning what you talk about. And also I want to talk about the YouTube trajectory too. You got a point? Go for it.
Yeah. So I think I have a way to like continue where we left off and keep moving it forward. So
go for it.
Facebook ads and all that. That kind of also helped me to understand a little bit more about how the internet was working at the time. So 2016, we had this Cambridge Analytica thing that happened.
Yes.
Right.
We run ads, Senator. That one.
Yeah. So once that happened, I started to think to myself, I was like, wait a minute. And this realization came after I found blockchain. But at the same time, I was like, in 2016, there was this moment where, you know, anyone could be on the internet, could run ads about pretty much whatever they wanted. And someone like myself who was 16 could have had a political motive. Like I could have been on there, like trying to create some sort of a political narrative and had, you know, just someone else giving me the money or whatever. And I was like, wait a minute, if anyone could get on Facebook and create a political narrative, like that's really powerful. And we need to think about what are the incentives around these different digital interactions that we have. So 2017, I told the story on my channel, but I think it's fascinating. My friend, we had just graduated from high school. He worked at a VC firm for the summer. He interned there. And after that, he was kind of talking to me one day, and like there was this article that came out about how Vitalik Buterin, who was the founder of Ethereum, had died. And so like, because he had died, quote unquote, like the price of Ethereum had tanked. And he was like talking to me about this. And he was like, you know, at this firm, they're like talking about this Ethereum thing. And for me at that time, I'm like, wait a minute, like I've heard about Bitcoin. You know, in high school, there's kids that are, you know, doing whatever with it. And I'm like, but what is Ethereum? Because that means that there's something else that's actually going on, right? That means that there's a thing happening here that I don't know about. That's potentially, you know, kind of wild. So anyways, from that point forward, I was like, okay, I need to understand what this is, because there's not just Bitcoin, there's also Ethereum. And that means there's a whole industry happening. So I go super deep down that rabbit hole, 2017 up until, I mean, today, I never really came back out of that rabbit hole.
I'm there too, buddy. I get it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I spent the next few years in university. I ended up working with a startup where, all right. So I ended up working with a startup that was actually one of the first real world asset projects ever. This was in 2020. And they ended up being the first ever DeFi protocol to actually get sanctioned by the SEC. I left right before that. I almost saw the writing on the wall. I was like, this is like a little bit too far. Let me like, you know, look for some other options. And then I went to work at the security token group. It's kind of like ironic. Like I went from like basically having these like these securities that were being offered that weren't registered to working with the security token group, which was a little bit more regulated side of the game. We were tokenizing securities on behalf of private issuers. And from a consulting perspective. And then I went all the way to becoming an investment broker. So I literally went like from like the wild, wild west to like right in between it all. And then like all the way to like having my Series 763 and like
you
learning
saw every angle
the game. Yeah. So anyways, from all of that, it was like, you know, all of this time I'm realizing like what's happening with blockchain and crypto is like a generational opportunity for one. Most people understand that by now. But with that comes the fact that if people aren't participating, then quite frankly, like they're potentially locking themselves out of the future of money, and going to be left behind in a way that, you know, like no matter what happens here, for sure, what's going to happen as far as is if these things continue to go the way they've been going, the wealth gap in the world is going to be way worse. It's going to be way, way worse. And so I was like, I need to do something about this. So I was in university at Miami at the time, and I was like, I need to go to like, just do something. So I went to high schools and started like talking to kids about blockchain and the history of money and stuff like this. And, you know, unfortunately it wasn't super sustainable. I'm kind of just like doing this because I wanted to. And so I wasn't able to continue doing it fully and still survive. But, and then eventually I realized I wasn't doing this anymore. And I was like, well, I need to find a way to do what I was trying to do there a little bit more scalably. And that is how I got to the channel. So hopefully that
amazing, man. Yeah,
made sense.
And I honestly, yeah, the blockchain stuff is the exact same experience that I had. I had the fortunate opportunity to learn about Bitcoin when I was in grade 10, so sophomore for any of you Americans. And I learned about it in school, and our business teacher, Mrs. Volk, talked about it. And I was like, how am I the only kid freaking out about this right now? Like everyone around me was like, oh, like that's cool, whatever. I was like, no, do you know what this means? If this happens, like this is literally a completely different game that we have here. And so I was very fascinated on Bitcoin, but I was a broke student, so I didn't buy any at the time. And that haunted me so much so that I became obsessed with blockchain technology. And I think that's probably why I didn't pull the trigger and buy any. The debate that I had was, should I buy a Subway sub that day or try to figure out buying Bitcoin? And of course, Subway won. So that was a very expensive sub. And then I became obsessed with learning, much like you. Ethereum was my next dive in. And I purchased a few Ethereum at the time when I think it was like $200 or $300. And I didn't have $1,000 to spend, man. And so the fact that I put this into this, I just, thought back to Bitcoin, and I was like, I knew this was a thing then, and I had the same sort of gut feeling at this time, and so I purchased some. And the more that I researched into it, I had the same conclusions that you did, where this is going to happen whether people like it or not. This is just such an orders of magnitude better way of doing the things that we're already doing right now, and the things that people are complaining about because they are just being told for a long time that this is how it is. But the more that you start asking, well, why is that? You start realizing that it's just compounding on shitty decisions or bad technology. And right. And so there's so much of that. And I've learned that even more through software development. So the past few years, we've been building a lot of software products. And the more that I get in the weeds with these engineers, they just are so ingrained in how things have been done that they can't conceive that it could be done a different way. And because I'm so ignorant to it all, I ask the dumb questions, right? And sometimes the dumbest questions provide the most enlightening responses, because when I was challenging these beliefs, because around their entire community, they all think and operate just like that, right? And it happens in finance too. Whatever works for them, they don't question it because it's working for them, right? But there's so many people that it doesn't work for because they don't have the luxury of the time or the resources or the connections. And I saw that with software too, where I was like, it's kind of unfair that I have a chance here because I only have the chance because I have the money who knows how to get to pay for the person who knows how to get through this curve. And this curve only really exists because of a shitty system. And so I saw that was happening with money too. And I just thought crypto is such an obvious way where a lot of these problems could get solved. And I think you kind of put your rose colored glasses on where you're like, oh, the future of money is going to be so amazing. And you decentralize this, decentralize that. And then as institutional investors have gotten more involved and legislation and whatnot, I'm sure it's going to end up looking a lot more similar to this current system that we have than we'd like to admit or what we hoped 4 years ago. But I completely agree with you. Blockchain is absolutely the future. And I don't think, like you said, most people realize that it's a life-changing opportunity. I don't think as many people do as need to. Like, I really think there's a massive gap. And that's actually why I started this show. Because I realized I was like, much like you said, I'm incredibly concerned about the bottom percentage of people because they're so far removed from having the mindset to get out. So their prison is real to them. Because although I could tell them and you can tell them that, yes, just go do this, and it would work, 100% it would work, they don't know the language we're speaking, basically, or they can't hear it. Right?
Dude,
it won't.
The language, language, that's the stuff that I wanted this channel to be about. Because the language, right, is the thing. Language has been kind of researched to be formative of the way that we think. Right. So if someone speaks a different language, they also think in a completely different way.
Totally.
And so what you're saying there is just so critical, and it sucks. And it got to the point to where, as I made this channel, I'm going to share a moment here. I hit like 10,000 subscribers at some point, and it wasn't about that at all. But what it was about was the fact that I had hit it so fast, and I knew that a part of the reason, Ben, was because of the way that I looked. And I had to sit there for a second, and I had to really internalize that. And I had to say, wait a minute, the reason this is blowing up the way it is because people don't often see someone who looks like them or whatever talking about these kinds of things in this way. And this language, right, is not stuff that they're always being exposed to. And I had a moment, dude, where I kind of broke down because I was livid that I had to face that reality, that no matter what I want to try to tell myself, that played a huge role, because I saw it in the comments, you see it in the data, and it's people that simply are not necessarily being exposed to this information, and the reasoning for that, I'm not going to speculate on. But in reality, it's just a fact. It's just a fact that this language, right, is one of those things that separates people for generations. So I just wanted to touch on that.
No, dude, 100%. And I think that what you mentioned there is I don't think it can be overstressed, the importance of that, because it's so true that for many people that are at a certain place, it's not enough just to hear the things. They have to hear it from someone who they feel like has a shared experience with them, right? And so I know that I grew up, and I'm so blessed to where I've grown up, because my school was just a melting pot of people. We were the feeder school for 2 government housing complexes. So with that, we had a ton of immigrants from all over the world. There were black people, white people, Indian people, every color, everyone. It was so awesome. Then we were the feeder school for for like the Down syndrome, like the special needs people. We were, and then also the feeder school for the gifted kids and the English as second language kids. So like, I couldn't even have made this in a sitcom, how much of a diversity this was. And that gave me such a blessing because I was able to not see people for the things that everyone else does, right? Like if you're only around people like you, which is naturally how it goes, right? Like we're just so typically we do that. You start to only listen to people like that, and it's such a disservice and it's such a negative thing where I was so lucky and blessed that some of the smartest people in my class were black, or some of the smartest people in my class were whatever color, right? So I just was so gifted that I got to, like, I feel so gifted that I got to just listen, right? I got the gift of just being able to listen and tune that out. But you're not wrong, man. Like, people need to hear it from people who look like them, which is why I was also so happy to see your channel too, because I was like, yes, like we need more of this. And Keith is like the perfect voice to echo these messages. So I don't think I hate that that's a reality, but I don't think that's a bad thing that it is that way. Like in terms of what you're doing, I think that's amazing. I think that's the point, right? I think that's amazing that you did do that, right? Because a lot of people don't have the courage to be that, because I'm sure a lot of people out there, like there's probably just as many smart people out there that have the same skin tone as you, and they didn't do the channel because they said there's not many people that do, right? And then it doesn't solve the problem. So like 100%. As much as it sucks so bad, but to change things, you have to do stuff that is not a lot of people are doing. So kudos to you, man. And also, let's talk about that growth for a sec, man, because, man, this number is crazy. So I'm a YouTube strategist by trade. So I literally grow channels for a living. And so when I saw your numbers, I was like, damn, Keith is cooking. So can you speak to the growth trajectory of this thing?
Yeah. So I'm like less than 45 days-ish in, I would say. And
45 days.
Yeah, something like that. It was like June 16th was the first video that I posted.
Keith, that's not normal, man. That is, dude, that's crazy. I work with some of the biggest podcasts in the world, right? And some of the biggest channels in the world. That is not normal, dude. So first of all, like, everyone listen to this. Let's give Keith a round of applause, bro. That is absurd. I'm losing my mind over here. That's fucking phenomenal. Pardon my French, but that is amazing, dude.
And you know, this is a part of why it just hit me so emotionally, because once again, like, I know that, like, the things that I'm saying, sure, they're important and they're unique in some way, but like at the same time, it's like a big part of whatever it is that has made this channel do so well has to be something that's like personal, you know, like it has to be personal, because once again, I'm not the smartest guy on YouTube. I'm not. So it's like, something's going on there that's deeper than you know, the content itself.
I think it's a happy connection of the two. I think you're far too modest. I think you are a lot smarter than you'll ever admit, and I think it's effort that led to that too, right? It's not just, I think the biggest thing is that whenever someone says they're smart, we always don't want to say that, because people have said that, oh, if you're saying you're smart, you're saying that you're just default better than someone else. And I used to fight that too, because I was always the kid who was super curious and learning all the time. And so objectively, I did know more than people around me, but I wasn't allowed to say it. And I eventually, like a few years ago, I was just like, my intelligence is my effort. Right. And so like, this is like, you don't see a guy who went to the gym all the time wearing a friggin' sweater every day. You see him walking around in a sleeveless. Right. So it's okay to flex your muscles, whatever they are, in whatever form and shape they come in. But the reality is too, is like, first of all, what you're saying is so needed. You're saying it really well too. So don't be so modest there. Like, your delivery and your ability to be watchable is incredibly rare. So the talent is the biggest thing, I would say, 110%. But the growth thing is not normal. But I will say is that, like, we as people, we're visual creatures. And so that kind of growth discrepancy around what you look is inevitable. I have been creating content for, like I said, nearly a decade. And I was in the niche of social media marketing. And so I had some of the best content, I would say, objectively, in the space. But the girls always grew faster than me. Always. They always grew faster than me. I would make the same video and I had made it first and mine was better, and they would get way more views. And so I just kind of realized, like, this is part of it. And so if you're listening to this and you're not doing it because of some reason that you're saying because of how you look, the reason why you say you shouldn't is the exact reason why you should. Right? Because yes, you may not get as many views as them, but there's a lot of people who would watch their content that wouldn't want to work with them because whatever reason they didn't gravitate to them like they did with me or whatever. And one of the things that I found too was that because I used my YouTube channel as a funnel for my agency, I always asked whenever I got someone to convert, I was like, what video got you here? And it was always one that didn't have many views. And it was one where I shared personal experiences where they resonated with who I was and a common experience.
I just had this conversation with someone who's like in the tax field. And she's like, you know, I'm doing all this professional stuff because, you know, I'm professional. I have to keep a professional face and this and that. And I'm like, dude, you need to tell your story. You need to be personal, because like all that stuff, yes, is going to get people to like know you and trust you or whatever. But like the thing that's going to get people to like you and the things that are going to get them to convert are going to be you being that quirky, weird version of yourself and just being you in front of that camera. So I just love that you just said that. It's so true.
Bro, it's everything. And you're listening to outdated rules. And so one thing that I had to realize was I saw all this stuff because I was so early on Gary and I was so curious that I was like, everyone who's around me is just wrong. Like my teachers are wrong. My parents are wrong. And then I battled with that. At first I was like, oh, they don't want me to be successful. They don't believe in me. And then after getting through that, because I was an immature kid, I was like, they actually want what's best for me. They just literally don't know. They don't know what they don't know. Like so many parents all over the world are giving the worst possible advice for their children. And it's from a place of love. Like prime example, my girlfriend's dad wants her son to go back to school. And I'm like, man, like he's a computer engineer. And I'm like, dude, there's nothing that school can teach him. If he goes to school, the jobs probably literally go to zero by the time he's done. But because he has this belief system that, oh, I'm a doctor, which is the guy, he's very successful in his own right. And in his social circle, the degree matters to them, right? And so people don't have a strong level of empathy. What I would say is that they're not able to zoom out from their situation, get into the kid's situation, and understand what their peer group would even look like. So a lot of the advice that you're getting from your parents and the people around you, it has good intentions. They just don't know what the hell they're talking about.
You know.
Go ahead.
And I wonder if that like the way that technology is like accelerating makes that more of a thing over time, right?
Totally. Yes, because the advice gets worse as the acceleration creeps up. Right. And so this is what I was, and I actually, I did this to a degree. I'm also, anything I ever say on this podcast, if you're listening to this and to you, Keith, is that I'm speaking to myself. Like every time I'm giving a piece of advice, it's not because I think I'm better. It's because I already did the fuck up and I learned it along the way, right? So I went to school, I went to university. I knew the whole time it was horseshit. And everyone around me, I'm like, are we all just playing this game as if we're learning things here and this is any bit of use? And I was like, I guess we're doing that. And so we kept moving forward and I kept getting my degree because my dad dropped out of school and he was an incredibly intelligent man, but he didn't have the internet. And so you couldn't be lazy and pass school back then because you had to at least show up to class. Right? If my dad was alive during the internet age, he would have breezed through school and it would have been no problem. But he didn't have that then. So like from the moment I was 5, he's like, you're going to university, you're going to do great, all this stuff. And the whole time I was there, man, the advice that these universities were giving me, Keith, was horrendous, man. I was in the marketing program and they were literally saying, don't post on social media. These businesses don't like that. And I'm just like, this is so, when they said that, it was my first year. I was like, I'm not listening to anything you guys say the rest of my 4 years here. Like, you don't know anything. And so then from that point forward, what I did is I created a new social media alias with like my full name. So I was doing that while these people were, because we had to report to these counselors every so often because I was in the internship program. And they'd always be like, are you posting on social media? Because they knew that I wanted to. And I'm like, no. Because I knew they wouldn't find me with my full name. And it just goes to show you that even the people in the highest positions of authority don't necessarily know what they're talking about.
That's a really, really good example. And I'm glad that you shared that. That's really powerful. Like these business schools are literally telling people not to post on social media.
Bro, it was crazy. Granted, that was like 7 or 8 years ago at this point. So I'm sure things have changed a little, but only out of necessity, right? Where it was so overwhelming, the amount of evidence. And then so another cool story is that as I grew my channel, I got featured on the live national news here in Canada. And because of that, I then got a ton of other media opportunities from like radios and stuff like that, because the story they ran with was I used YouTube to pay off my student debt, which was true. And so then I then had to have this phone. Oh, this makes me so mad thinking about this still. So I went into the radio broadcast and I had this one-on-one interview with the hosts. I give my whole spiel. I try to get people to start posting content, all this stuff. And they didn't tell me they were going to do this. But after my segment concluded, they had a social media expert from the University of Waterloo How the fuck you can be an expert when you've never posted a video? I don't know. But this is what they said, okay? So after I go and drop my whole spiel as this young kid, this expert with the certifications comes on and basically says I'm an idiot. Everything I said was wrong.
Wow.
And I was like, this is supposed to be the highest position of authority here, and she's literally 110% wrong, but she's using her title to say that she is right. And anyone who listened to that interview that I just wasted my last 15 minutes on wouldn't have listened to a single word that I said. Right? And zooming out on this, I knew that then, but I couldn't say anything because of the powers that were there. And so it's true everywhere. Like, people are only seeing this democratization happen in social media because it's right in their face. But what I think you're doing is that people saw this happen, right? They saw how social media changed every facet of their life, in existence, in life, relationships, business, whatever. And I think they're finally realizing that same type of shift is happening in money. And I think that's why people are gravitating to you so much, because they've been on this outdated language and they're finally realizing, because they saw this happen once, they're like, the people who are talking are either full of shit or they have to be full of shit because the system that's built around them has a lot of rules and guardrails that they have to stick within.
Yeah, man. And it's crazy because it's happening on every level, right? Like, the guy that reached out to me, he does like he has one political channel and stuff. And like, you know, people have just, especially 2020, changed everything, really, where people lost all trust in experts and in institutions and so on. And so we've seen this acceleration of that, what you're talking about, not only in, business or education, but like across all institutions.
Completely.
And so it's an interesting shift. I think you had on Peter Diamandis on the show, and I feel like he talks about stuff like that probably sometimes, and other big tech leaders that have been seeing this shift happen, and it's fascinating. One thing I wanted to say, dude, this is random to go back, but like,
no, please.
We went from business schools telling people not to post on social media to I went to the University of Miami, and we had this girl named Alex Earl, who blew up on social media. And now, right, people like that are going in and teaching guest lectures. So that's where we're at now.
Bro, I remember being in those programs and saying, I should be teaching this. Like, I remember literally saying that when I was sitting in this bullshit class. I'm like, bro, these people have no idea what they're talking about. And it's so funny that has now finally come full circle, where she's going in and teaching, because that is just the reality, right? That is where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, everyone's looking for information from someone, I guess, at this point that they can actually just relate to.
Yes. They're not looking for the permission as much anymore. It's starting to diminish, because permission was associated with authority. And that's also a mechanism of just like who we were as people. I think a lot of people, they associate malicious intent for a lot more things than are truly malicious. They were just the best that we had at that time, and it became the norm, right? Like, where people would associate a college degree with authority, because where else do you establish a sense of authority, right? It's kind of a trusted mechanism that you can understand the concept, and you're also diminishing your degree of risk, because chances are, if they have this piece of paper from an established institution, chances are there's less likely that doctor will hurt you. You know what I mean? It's like, so I think a lot of this is just flawed programming. And I think that these systems that we're trying to change can be amazing if we make them so, but they can also just be equally as bad.
Yeah, that's something that I'd love to touch on too, because I listen to Tom Bilyeu. He's another big leader that I like to listen to, and he's talking about all these kinds of issues.
Yeah,
and it's
great.
like, although, maybe the power is getting back into the hands of these individuals and so on, as that's happening, there are individuals who may not necessarily be in a position where either, first off, that they're actually coming from a place of where they're trying to do something good. And then also, and I consider myself in this category to some degrees, like, aren't necessarily in the best position to be necessarily like, teaching or giving information or whatever. And like, we have to deal with the misinformation aspect of all of this as well, is what I'm really trying to point out. So,
completely.
And that's the information institutional side, but then also on this like actual structure side, when it comes to like digital finance and all that, there's a lot of stuff that people aren't talking about that could lead down a very slippery slope for the rest of, our existence as human beings. But I digress.
Yeah, we'll get into that here. But one more point that I thought about that before we move on to where I want to take this next, is that we talked about language here too. Language was also the gatekeeper for knowledge, right? It was hidden behind language that you had to acquire to then get into the club, essentially, because you couldn't even consume the content because there was so much jargon mixed in there that only industry experts could understand. And so for most of all of our lives, and most of people who would watch this as lives, academics really purposely flexed that language muscle because it was really what they paid for, right? And so there's a lot of people out there who I think the smartest people on the planet I'll say air quotes smartest, because I think there's a lot of really educated people that don't realize they're about to be useless, like in the marketplace yet, because it's about to change pretty rapidly, and they just don't get that because they've always been the smart person. But the most educated person on a subject matter that doesn't matter, are they still smart? That's the question we're going to have to ask, right? And I think there's a lot of people out there who that's been their whole identity, it's been their whole life, and it's because that's what they paid for. Right, like if you go through school, I remember doing this, and I'm like, why does everyone say if you don't go to university, you're a failure, basically? I remember feeling that in high school all the time. The whole theatrics of what school are you going to go to, the big announcement. I played football, so it was like, where are you signing with university, right? It was always that. And it's because everyone involved in this went to university, and no one wants to see themselves as a failure. No one wants to see themselves as wasting time. So of course they're incentivized to push this because it also makes the value of their own degree go up if they get more people to like more good people, I would say, like more competition. Exactly. So it's just there's so much change coming so rapidly, man. But let's dive a little bit deeper into what you learned specifically. 'Cause I want to go into crypto in a second, but I think it's first important for us to establish the foundational teachings that you learn from these top 1% people about how they just move and navigate through life and with money, because I'm sure that played a big role on why you saw crypto the way you did.
Yeah, I mean, so there's that 1% stuff, but then also just being online and just really seeing what the people that I wanted to be like were doing. And the biggest lesson that I think I could say I took away from it all is using money as a tool.
Okay.
If I hadn't been exposed to these people that were extremely wealthy that did not have anything nicer than a Toyota, right? I wouldn't have understood that, money is something that you use to create more time for yourself or to create a better life for someone that you care about or even your community, and so that I think was a big thing that through osmosis, I kind of picked up on of really understanding like you don't use money to buy stuff. You use money to create experiences for yourself, to, make sure that you have your time, you can do what you want, and things like that. Because once again,
one point.
Yeah.
I don't want to move and lose this. One thing I had written down here from a video that I watched of yours was about you tried to explain the concept of this, like the science of why proximity genuinely does matter.
Yeah.
Right. Can you speak to that and then how people could do that with online means? Because there's a lot of people who are like, I can't get around the private school like Keith did. So could you give those people some advice?
Yeah. So the proximity thing, I recently read a book by Barbara Tversky, and it's called Mind in Motion. And Barbara Tversky is the wife of the late Amos Tversky, who was a very famous psychologist, and he passed before he was able to get the Nobel Prize that he would have otherwise gotten alongside of, my goodness, I'm losing his name at the moment. Anyways, in this book, she talks about this concept called motor resonance and emotional resonance. And what this is how essentially through osmosis or through your observations of other people, you see yourself in them, whether you want to or not. So the example I gave in that video was like, I put up my hand and I asked, which hand am I holding up? And everyone watching is going to say, hey, that's your right hand, even though this is on, likely the left side of their screen. And so the thing about that is that our brains, we, by default, when we see someone else, even an animal, for instance, we know that we associate our body with their body. And that's why instantly that that's my right hand, because your brain automatically does that. And so that's the motor resonance, but there's also emotional resonance where we also embody the emotions of the people around us. And because of that, like, it gets a layer deeper when it comes to, you know, things like money. Because, like, you know, you'll see someone spend money on something, but you'll see how they spend it, right? You'll see that they're spending money on something without even thinking about it. And that is something that you're absorbing, right, through that proximity. And if you associate yourself as someone who's like that person, if you also, she talks in this book about how, like, relationships, we create them almost spatially in our mind. So when you're close to someone, you're literally close to them, and your brain associates that closeness with that person and the different things that they do. So without going too much deeper into some of that, I mean, I really, that's
as deep as you want, man.
Yeah, that's probably as deep as I can go. But
okay.
You know, there's a physical, scientific nature to proximity and the importance of it in your life. So being able to create that, right? So everyone's like, oh, I can't do that. And I understand that it can be more difficult. But the things that really helped me the most was, once again, we talked about, like, we have access to the internet. So yeah, I had these experiences in front of me, but also I was on YouTube 24/7 listening to CEOs. You know, I'm 16 years old. I'm listening to Mark Zuckerberg. I'm listening to Evan Spiegel. I'm listening to, like, whoever is putting out information about what it is that they're doing, how they've gotten to where they've gotten. That's what I'm trying to absorb at all times. And then books. The most powerful thing is books, because not only can you get access to someone anywhere in the world, but you can also get access to someone anywhere in history and in time. And so that's the power of a book, man. And that, you know, we got all this information online, but I really, truly believe that books are the most condensed version of information that you can get. And like I was saying, the tip that I got from this, like, family office network or whatever they're on YouTube was, like, read the books that were written by the people that you want to be like, because that will get you where you want to go.
Hey there, me again. Yeah, a lot of you didn't click the subscribe button, so here I am again. So if you don't want to see me as much, just help a brother out. Hit the subscribe button down below, and I'll do even less of these when you guys just do the subscribe thing. Unfortunately, it matters. It doesn't, but it does. So I appreciate you in advance. You're a legend. Let's get back to it. Oh man, I couldn't agree more. And it's crazy because everyone on the outside who hasn't changed their life, they always hear the same cliche things, and they think that it's just BS that we're all just saying. We're giving away the sauce for how we transformed ourselves. It's literally just the barrier of entry is the consumption of the things that you know you should be consuming. And I think with books, I would agree with that to the nth degree, because I also think that the fact that you have to read a book and there is more friction, I know it takes more time, but I think that's a necessity because you're associating more importance to it, because you're trading more time, and you're also gradually transforming reality of your self-perception of, I'm someone who does this and it's this important to me that I'm doing the things that I know almost anyone else wouldn't. And the transformation that this can give me is worth that trade, right? It's worth not consuming TikTok. It's worth not eating the bad food, whatever it is to you. It's a statement of belief, right? It's a firm statement of belief that I am this, I do this. And it's really powerful. So I completely agree with that. Books have changed my life tremendously. And a big one for me, because I know so many people listening to this, you're in a regular 9-to-5 job or whatever, and you don't like it. You have little windows of power where you do have control over what you do. For me, when I was going to school, or when I had my first job out of school to pay off my debt, I would have lunch with a CEO every day through a podcast. And I visualized myself as being a fly on the wall, having a conversation with whoever I was listening to. And I took pride in that, right? I took pride that I'm a CEO in the future. For right now, I'm interning at whatever company it was that day. And I'd go up to the roof of my building and I would listen to my podcast and I would write notes, and I was having lunch with Mark Cuban or having lunch with whoever it was. And that kind of stuff is impossible to overestimate. And so with what Keith is saying here in terms of books, podcasts, we know that's good. But also, if you do that and then you're also consuming a ton of crap, the amount of impact you're going to receive from the good stuff is going to be diminished so greatly. Same with diet. You can go eat a kale salad with all the protein in the world. If you follow it up with the biggest milkshake in the world, it doesn't really matter.
Love that analogy right there. I love that.
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you. So let's move into, do you have anywhere else you want to go, or should I take this somewhere else?
Oh man, there was something I was going to say about first off, yeah, and I love the sitting and just like having lunch with him. Okay, that was the thing. Like, there was a time where I was reading a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Yep, Napoleon.
And I'm sitting by, I'm at the University of Miami. There's like this big lake. It's beautiful. And I just remember, like, what you said really resonated, because I just remember sitting there and being like, I'm sitting here, I'm 19 years old, I'm reading this book. And like, not only is what in this book transformative, but also just like the fact that I'm sitting here, like in such a peaceful state, like everyone's like furious, frantic, trying to figure something out in their life, running to class. And I'm just like sitting here at peace with like, this book is changing my life right now. Like, and I'm the kind of person that's just sitting here reading this book. I think that there is a big part of the transformation of that identity piece that's something I've never thought about before, for sure.
Most of life is deciding what's important to focus on and what's not. Almost everyone who's suffering out there is because they're focusing on the wrong things and they don't know that. Right. And so they think it's the thing, they think it's all these different things when really it's just a prioritization issue. Right. And it can start in the smallest of ways. I'm very sympathetic to every situation. I know so many people are struggling financially. I know so many people are struggling from a time perspective. But if you check your screen time. If your screen time is over 30 minutes, I don't want to hear you complain, because you could use those 30 minutes every single day to make some change. Right. And so I'm totally I understand it's so easy for everyone to say that who's done this, but those 30 minutes a day on something positive can make a massive impact over time, right? When you start to say I only have 30 minutes and I'm using it for this. I was some of the most productive I've ever been in my entire life when my situation was working a full-time job, running my business and running my YouTube channel and then running and also I had another side job. I literally had no time to myself. It's the most productive I've ever been, because when I had that tight window, I said, I'm someone who does this, which made me feel great. And also I was able to channel all the things that I hated into the tiny amount of time that I had to do the thing that I knew was important. So when you're listening to this and you're hearing what Keith is saying to focus on, yes, focusing on it is important, but the emotional attachment to that focus is what will deliver the outcome the fastest possible. When I would get home from work and I was creating my YouTube channel and I worked 12-hour day, and then by the time I could film something, it was 11 p.m. at night, but Instagram had just dropped the change. I would turn on my camera knowing I had to get up at 5 a.m. in the next morning, and I would film the best video I could over the next hour and a half, and I edited it and I got it up because I knew this is what could change me. And so I approached it like it could, with that kind of effort and enthusiasm. And then in turn, it literally did that. But if I didn't approach it with that kind of effort, with the tiny time that I had, I would have never gotten out. So it's a combination of these things, and prioritization is the most important element. And stuff like this, like having the conviction to believe what people are saying, right? That's one of the hardest things that I have, is that people always just think that it won't work for them. And you're always right. If you think it won't work for you, you are right. The moment you are like, this could work for me, you're also right. Bro, it's mental.
Yeah, man. It's really interesting, man. It's just like you said, it's either on or it's off. I had a coach in high school. He would scream out, this is in like PE class, like, normal kids, people are like, dude, like chill out. But he would be like, he's like, you either complain or you compete. You either complain or you compete. And, it's just like, it's real. At the end of the day, it's like either you're going to decide that there is something that you can do and you do whatever that thing is, or you don't. And it sucks because there's some people who will only be around other people, right, who are in that mind frame. So if you're listening to this, right, you've pretty much probably won already, and just keep doing that, and just keep surrounding yourself with people. This is the biggest thing that I have, because I have a community now where people are coming in, and the thing is like, they're like, I can't talk to anyone about this stuff that I'm going through. I can't talk to anyone. And that right there, that isolation is what can prevent people from ever even like having a chance to break out. It's like you feel this relief. I do these like free calls with people where they're telling me about what they're doing with their crypto and all this, and it's like the relief, right, that comes from this, of just being able to talk to someone who's had the experience, or who's been there, who knows what it's like when your family's looking at you like you're crazy. It does a lot. That community, try to find community, whether it's online or in person. Just that's going to be the way that you can change your situation.
Totally. You mentioned that proximity matters, and so too does online. Like, I don't think that that physical proximity is the only issue. It's just consumption of all kinds, right? Stimulus of any kind. And I love your gym teacher. My quote that I always do is, you either do or you don't. There is no try. I always say that because if you are just going to create an outcome, trying is if you say I'm trying, you're giving yourself a way out, right? Because if you're trying, it means that you may fail. When you say I'm doing this, you're just going to do it until it's done. And those are very different things. I had this conversation with my mom yesterday. And so I love the point that you said about getting in a group community. I try to be my mom's group community because I know she won't pay for one, but she's starting her own business. And I've been telling her this stuff for the last decade, but I've tried to really drill it into her head about how much this stuff matters. And you're totally right, dude. Almost everyone out there can name everyone in their life and just say that they're negative, or they'll have something negative to say. And it does debilitate your progress. So getting around more people is so eye-opening. And so one thing that you can do right now, I'm not saying to even remove anyone from your life per se. I would audit how much time you're giving to certain people and ask, is that in alignment with who I would want to be? If I am who I want to be, would I give them time? I would first ask that. And then moving forward, because this is easier to do with new people, constantly ask, would my dream life and who I want to be, would they hang out with this person? If the answer is no, don't let them into your life, because it's not going to be a positive thing. And you only need one or two people that are like Keith to completely change your life, because your expectations change, and like attracts like. So when you're around this place, you're emitting this frequency. Whenever I meet people who are like Keith, I literally know before we even speak. Like before you open your mouth on your first video, I was like, I'm going to like this guy. It's just like this energetic thing, man. It's crazy. And it sounds like bullshit until you do it and it's real, right? So it's insane. So what's the group that you're offering? Because you mentioned that you have one.
Yeah, well, right now it's just a paid community inside of Patreon, essentially, where what we're doing is we're going over what we're seeing in macroeconomics, teaching also some investing and macroeconomic principles as we go through, and have events that, you know, get us to teach and talk about it. And also staying on top of what's happening with digital assets and blockchain, and how that's affecting the macro picture, or at least how it interacts with that. So that's what it is so far. And then, you know, there's a networking aspect to it as well for people who want that extra experience, where you can come in and be around other people that are actually looking at and caring about these things as well. So that's what that's all about.
So who's that for? Because I'm sure people listening to this, people are like, people don't even, that's another thing too. I want you to catch yourself being pessimistic, because your baseline might just be so pessimistic that you don't even realize it's happening. So I know people will hear that and be like, oh, that's super valuable, but they'll instantly go to a place of, oh, but it's probably not for me. Right? Like, oh, so who is this group for?
Yeah, I mean, it's for people who, first off, are missing that community piece. I think that's the biggest thing that we're offering that people are actually enjoying, is like, there are other people that are going through this lack of understanding of what's happening in macroeconomics, or, you know, feeling like you don't know, and a lot of people know way more than they think they do. But you need that reassurance. You know, like you need people to validate you, and that's a big part of the value that we're bringing, is just that community aspect of digital assets and blockchain, because that's a whole thing on its own. But then also, you know, macroeconomics and how that impacts your investing and so on.
Totally, man. I was always a huge believer in education, because I saw through my life how one person could change my life in dramatic different ways. And so if you can increase the chances that you're gonna be around people like that for an expense of, let's say 100 or whatever it is, then that's a very small price to pay when you think about the compounding nature of who you become off of that, right? I think that's how, much like you said before about your life changes the day that you start seeing money as a tool, right? So too is our relationships, right? And osmosis of being around them. So love that. Definitely, we'll link that group below. So if you guys want to try that out, go do it. It'll be linked down below. The next piece I want to move to here is that another one of your videos was an awesome title. Is if you don't know the bond, or you don't know how bonds work, you don't understand money, something like that. I probably butchered the title. Can you, and I can admit that I was ignorant to the depth of how this works. I knew at a surface level, but I didn't understand it as well as you did. Can you explain for all of those people who don't understand money how the bond market works?
Right. First off, I have to say that is a title, because so many people got offended, right? And it's like, guys,
no,
like,
I loved it, dude.
I'm a YouTuber.
That's why it worked.
Trying to get people to, and it worked. Yeah, it worked. There were people that came into this video and they were like, I only watched this because of the title. And
it worked. You're a great YouTube copywriter already.
So So yeah, I mean, from a high level, essentially, there are companies and there are governments who need money for different causes. And for these causes, what they will do is they will raise money in the form of debt, and these debt instruments are called bonds. And so, as an investor, what you're doing is you're lending money to a government or a company in order to essentially earn a return, interest on that money that you've given them. So I think, the thing that was probably more insightful in that video for people who aren't, or who are already familiar with bonds and capital markets in general, is kind of the aspect of how this can affect the government, right? And how that can affect the overall economy based upon basically how much money the government is borrowing, how much of that money they're able to pay back. So the debt to GDP part, I think, was probably the most powerful piece of this video. And what that's all about is that, so every year the government in America right now is running a deficit. So the government is spending more money than it is making in revenue from taxes. And so because of that, it has to go into the market and borrow this extra money that it needs to spend. And as it does that, it is increasing what is called the deficit. And not only is there a yearly deficit, there's a yearly deficit from how much money they're spending versus how much money they're making, which is that gap is what they're raising. And then also that deficit adds to the total debt burden that the government has been accumulating throughout all of these years. And this is happening in most countries around the world. Most countries operate at a deficit. There are certain jurisdictions that don't, like places like Singapore, I believe, is in a surplus where they're actually taking in more in revenue than they're spending. But in the United States, we're deep about $38 trillion in debt. And now, what a lot of people who are way smarter than me are concerned about is the fact that our debt burden has gotten so high that the interest payments alone are taking up a huge percentage of the entire deficit, right? So the problem with that is that, like, any money that's going to pay this debt off, which people would argue it's not really happening, is going towards the interest payments. And like, that's all money that's basically going to nowhere. Whereas that money could be being spent on, helping people, or, creating government programs, or investing in businesses, however you want to see, right, money from the government being used. So the debt to GDP. So GDP is really not a great measure of, like revenues, because it plays with imports and exports. But at the same time, it's kind of like a general gauge that you can use to think about how much commerce is being done in the economy. And with that, right, you might be able to take, you can kind of infer how much could the government possibly make from taxes based upon the revenues that businesses and people are generating. So this debt to GDP ratio is essentially trying to look at how much debt do we have to how much income, imagine, that the government is actually bringing in on a yearly basis. And if we can increase, right, the amount of income, the amount of GDP compared to the total debt burden, then we can get closer to being able to at some point pay off the debt, which people understand that that's never going to happen per se. We're not actually going to pay off the debt. But you just want it to not be so impossible that what ends up happening is we start to downgrade our credit rating. So the United States government has lost its credit rating from the third big credit rating agency. And this is a big moment in history, because now all three of the credit rating agencies have no longer determined that the United States is a perfect borrower. And what this means is essentially the demand for U.S. treasuries is going down, because other people are saying, well, the U.S. is never going to pay off this debt, and it's becoming less and less likely that they'll ever be able to do so. And so why am I lending them my money when they're not necessarily going to pay off even their own debt? So, I'm not an expert in all of this stuff. But what I listen to is people like Ray Dalio, who talk about this death spiral, where essentially the government is having to borrow money to pay off debt, but the rate at which they're having to borrow that money is going up, and the amount of interest that they're paying on that debt is going up. And because of that, it essentially is never possible. They're just going to have to continue to borrow money to pay off the more debt that they're raising, and then borrowing more money to pay off that debt that they're raising at a worse and worse rate. So that's the big issue that everyone's concerned about right now, is the debt to GDP and how much of that debt is essentially having to be financed at a higher rate.
Totally. And I want to get to the federal rate in a second here. But the first question that I'm sure people would have is, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, but how can they run a deficit like that? And how can they do it for so long? Or why would they ever do that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think it's the late 80s-ish, somewhere in the last century, there was this concept called MMT, or modern monetary theory, that kind of came about. And, once again, guys, like I'm not an expert in this stuff. I've just studied this because of blockchain and crypto. This MMT idea was that governments, instead of being limited by the debt burden, essentially, the only thing that governments are really limited by is inflation. So when the government spends money, it can lead to inflation, because they're buying up goods. They're basically spurring investment in the economy when they're investing into the economy. And so MMT is basically saying that that's the only limit to which government spending the only thing that can stop government spending is that inflation gets too hot. Because then, you have this inflationary spiral and things get out of hand, and the value of the dollar goes down. So what has happened so far is that we've basically been practicing this modern monetary theory, where when the government borrows money, by the way, like sometimes the Federal Reserve, will actually buy these bonds from the government. And so people are concerned about the fact that, like, all of this money is coming into circulation and the government's borrowing money from the Fed. And that is creating inflation. And the biggest problem that people have is that they're being taxed, right? So you're being taxed even though the government can print its own money, essentially.
Crazy.
Yeah. And it's like, so why am I paying taxes if my taxes are never going to cover the budget, right? Like no matter what, you're going to borrow more money from yourself, essentially. It's a little bit more complex than that. And I'm still paying taxes. So I'm being taxed, first off, in two ways, because now I'm being taxed off the money that I'm making, and I'm having to pay in taxes, but I'm also being taxed because of the fact that you're continuing to print money and the value of that money is going down. So I'm getting double taxed, all because people have decided that this was how it was going to work. And so I kind of forgot the original question, but this is the depth at which I can really speak on these issues.
Totally. Yeah. And so the inflation issue is one that everyone has felt. Obviously, the cost of things have gone pretty insane. COVID was a big push for that because of the attempts to economically maneuver that situation and push off what would have been a likely outcome of a severe financial recession or depression off of that kind of change in economics across the board. And so I think we're paying the price for that now. And I think, much like you mentioned, the debt continues to spiral because a lot of the previous debt is coming due, and to refinance the debt, they'd have to do it at the current day federal rate, is my understanding. And so that's why there's this big standoff between the person behind the choice of the federal rate and Trump. And so as a big crypto enthusiast like myself, the Twitter discussions between, is his name, Powell, what's his first name?
Jerome.
So Jerome and Trump, their back and forth is pretty amazing, honestly. Like so funny to watch. When they were together with those hard hats, did you see that?
Yeah. I didn't fully watch, but I was like, is that real?
Honestly, it was too funny to be AI, because when I was watching it, I was like, this is hilarious. They're both, like, Trump is a character, obviously, and it's just so funny seeing them back and forth, because Trump will just say whatever comes to his mind, and he basically was publicly said, "Oh yeah, you're doing worse at your job," and showed him some numbers, and then there was like a back and forth that should have totally been behind closed doors that was done live with cameras. It was crazy. But so Trump wants the economy to at least aesthetically look like it's going really well. He's always make America great, and this is going to be the strongest economy ever. But they do have this debt problem that they're going to have to pay off these loans that have been done before, and they got to refinance them. What do you see happening with the federal rate? Do you see that coming down? Where do you see them finally making a decision there?
Yeah, so I think the important thing to touch on with what you just said there is what we've seen from Trump's plan so far is that they're trying to grow their way out of this problem.
Yes, very important.
So yeah, so the idea is increase spending, which will then increase investment, increase revenues essentially, and allow them to then be able to start to pay down the debt. And also, hopefully, their goal is to at some point get interest rates on the long end down lower so that they can start to refinance and term out the debt, as you were kind of mentioning before, as far as all this debt that's coming due. We need to take that debt and roll it out into a longer time frame. So I kind of forgot what the question was.
Yeah, no. So with all of this debt coming up, there's so much taking place at one time that this moment in history is why everyone's freaking out, is because we are always like, media's job is to make us freak out for one, but there are also an absurd amount of things happening, converging at the very same time that will totally shape the fabric of our reality, right? And so with that is this whole financial system. And so do you see any reality where out of this, the states loses their dominance as the number one primary driver of the economy on a global scale?
I think it's possible. I think from the things that I've seen in the blockchain distributed ledger technology space, I think that there's been a plan in place to prevent that for a very long time.
I agree.
So that's kind of how I look at it. We can go down the super conspiratorial route. I did a video.
I'm here for it, man. I'm fully, bro. If anyone knows me personally, they know I'm here for it.
So I'll take it back then on the crypto thing. Let's talk about it real quick.
Yeah, let's do it.
Bitcoin was released technically the white paper dropped in late 2008, and it fully went live early 2009. And obviously this was in the middle of the financial crisis. I don't see that as a coincidence. And it also isn't necessarily something that could have happened overnight, right? So for sure, whoever is responsible for creating this network did not come up with it in like 6 months. This could have taken a decade of research to come up with something that would be this powerful and this impactful in the world. So, there's a lot of research and a lot of digging that you can do that could link the creation of this network to not a singular individual. I'll just say that. I'll leave it there.
Totally.
The way that I thought about this, so I read a book called Currency Wars by Jim Rickards a few years back. And this was I think he published that in 2011. So he doesn't even really talk about Bitcoin in the book at all, I don't think. But he talks about how different nations basically have created these different scenarios. So his job was, he worked for the Department of Defense as a consultant, where what they did was they asked him to come up with different scenarios of how different countries could use economic warfare in order to overthrow the reign of the US dollar and so on. It's 2011 that he wrote the book and published it. I don't even know when this was taking place. Reading that book just kind of gave me the perspective of this is something that people are sitting in rooms thinking about, right? They are coming up with ways to create economic warfare or defend themselves from economic warfare. And when I realized that, I was like, well, this Bitcoin thing kind of feels like an economic political weapon, quite frankly. And, now here's where it gets super conspiratorial, because at this point, I think everything that we said so far is kind of just what it is. But the way that I started to think about it was okay, if I knew that someone were going to try to overthrow the reign of the US dollar, then wouldn't it make sense for me to do it first? Wouldn't I have much more control over the process if I did it myself? So now, I don't know that that's what happened. It could still be from some outside actor and so on and so forth. But once again, from a game theory perspective, it's well, if I, one up myself, then I'm in control of the narrative. And so, that's I guess what I would say for now. But then there's also the fact that this is the first iteration of blockchain technology, and a lot of people stopped there. And a lot of people and now it's funny now because everyone now is Bitcoin maximalists. People are coming into the game and they're Bitcoin maximalists. And I'm like, dude, you haven't done the research, brother. Like, I'm sorry, but like,
There's so much of that. Yeah, there's so much of that. It's honestly kind of shocking to me, and I guess it goes to show to people's natural desire to be comfortable with shallow understanding or gaining an understanding and wanting to stick there and not being curious to go to the next layer. Because I think if you do that even a little bit, the whole conversation changes.
For sure, man. For sure, man. I'm glad that you're with me, because it's hard to talk to a Bitcoin maximalist, man. They come at you really hard.
I don't think it's hard. I think it's sometimes impossible, right? Because they're so deeply rooted. It's almost become a religion to some people, where they're so deeply rooted in these beliefs. And I also think it's kind of insane that the average person on the outsider, like, they don't know the fact that the creator of Bitcoin is not even a single person or a named person. It's this alias. Like you mentioned, Satoshi Nakamoto is the alias that was given, and there's so many different videos on who is Satoshi and which people they are. And yeah, like if it quacks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And so with what you're saying about the advent of this, the only way they could really pull that off is to do something like that, right? If it needs the masses to function, the masses can't believe they didn't build it, right? With the level of education that we have now, like, people have to rally behind it and think that they are pushing it forward. So I would not be shocked if you're dead on. I have no idea. I'm not educated enough on the origins of it. I don't know if anyone really is, but completely agree with you that, go ahead.
Here's the thing that I broke down in the video that I said. It's called What They're Not Telling You About Crypto. The internet itself came from DARPA.
Yeah,
okay, which
crazy.
Is the Department of Defense project that was created during the Cold War. And the idea was they were trying to create a network that could survive a nuclear attack, where they could communicate with researchers across the world. So, if you decided to just kind of follow the logical, sequence of what would come next after something like that, potentially a network where you could not only send information, but also send value.
Totally.
So,
yeah, it just makes too much sense. And yeah, there's just so many ways we can go with this. And I want to keep going on the crypto route, because I do think that that's a very important thing. So you just made a video about the U.S. crypto report. And I think it's also really important for us to educate people on these regulatory changes and the fact that they're actually putting in rules in place. Because for so long, man, like probably 95% of the world is just adamant that crypto scam. Like, that's all they see. They don't listen to anything. And now the paid voices on these major networks are now coming out and being like, Bitcoin this, Ethereum that. And so if they're doing that, this shit is set. Like, this stuff is happening, and not enough people can understand the language because they're just so attached to Bitcoin crypto scam. And so they don't even listen to anything after those words. Can you explain the radical changes in approach to regulatory things and then the crypto report?
Yeah, man. I mean, wow. The thing is, like, it's such a journey that I've even been on. I've only been here since 2017. But, imagine for the people that have been around since 2009.
Yeah, I can't imagine that, truthfully.
It's like we've gone from being the absolute villains, right? The people who are trying to, I'm not even going to say this stuff, but like all of the dirty, nasty things that people have said about blockchain and cryptocurrency, to now where we're at the point where even just a couple of years ago, you had Gary Gensler attacking projects left and right, shutting people down. They were being locked out, not being able to get bank accounts. From what we've heard, there was Operation Choke Point 2.0, where the government was literally not allowing not just businesses to not have bank accounts, but they were debanking individuals who ran these companies. And, that's nuts that in the United States we were dealing with that over the past just 2-3 years. Anyways, now we're looking at, it's unreal. We're looking at the entire coordination of the United States government towards pushing the adoption and regulation of this technology. So from January, when Trump took office, he signed an executive order like a couple days after he was in, saying that he wanted to create a cryptocurrency task force, working group or whatever. Okay, cool. That happened. Within days, the SEC announced their efforts to create a crypto task force within the Securities and Exchange Commission, who was the one that has been basically responsible for a lot of the attacks that have been held across the industry for the past 10 years. And all of a sudden now, just like that, we're looking at a world where the United States government is coordinating to get all of the different regulations done. You got the SEC, you got the CFTC, they're all working together to like delineate what are the different types of currencies and cryptos and so on. And then, you know, Trump decided he launched his meme coin. So also like a week after that, the SEC said, oh, meme coins are fine, by the way, like this is not a problem anymore. Like, okay, interesting. You know, and that was wild too, because not only did that say, okay, yeah, excuse Trump for what he did, but also it's like this world that we're moving into where meme coins are going to be treated as a real financial instrument is wild to me.
Yeah. What is your opinion on why they did that? I kind of feel like it was a deliberate mechanism to slow down awareness, right? Because I do think we were getting some momentum where there was real things happening. And so this was a great way to be like, see, I told you it was a scam. I think this bought them a few more months.
Interesting. You know, dude, when it comes to that stuff too, right? Like Gary Gensler, who taught at MIT about cryptocurrency and blockchain, like he knows the space. He knew what he was doing by the time he took the reins as the SEC chairman. Like, what really was going on? Like, why really were they, you know, attacking these projects and not putting forth guidance on what people should do? You know, like for years. So, you know, yeah, there's that side of it too. Like, is there some deliberate sort of keeping people away from this technology and this information, you know?
Maybe I'm the biggest tinfoil hat wearer out there, but I personally feel like that is the case, where I think that a lot of this has already been set. And so they're just deciding who and what knows what when, you know what I mean? And they're using different mechanisms to speak to people out their language. As much as I also think, yes, there's a lot of incompetent people that do work in government or maybe the public interface. There's also freaking geniuses that work in the government. And so sometimes the most effective mechanism of control is the perception that you're dumb. Right? Like it's way easier to manipulate people when they think you're playing a different game than you're actually playing. So much like you said with the advent of Bitcoin in general, stuff like this, like it constantly reeks of moves for other reasons. Personally, as a crypto enthusiast like myself, I love the fact that meme coins are fair game too, truthfully, because while it is like gambling in its current form, I also am so intrigued by the potential of young people to create community-like movements, businesses, brands, IPs off the back of something like a meme coin. And so we had Luca Nets on the show recently, the founder of Pudgy Penguins, and like he's just executing a masterclass on how this stuff works, man. And I'm so grateful for him to be in this space, doing the hard stuff first, because this stuff really happened back in the day with legacy media, movies, entertainment companies, etc. But he's using the modern day age to really motivate younger people to build what will be the next one. And it's just so cool. Go ahead.
I got to ask you about that. Like, how do you know Luca Nets?
So
how did you find him?
Yeah, man. So I bought a Pudgy in like 2021, whenever they came out. So I was a holder of them, and same thing with you. Like, when I first saw him on a camera, I instantly knew that we would be like, I would like him. And because he had the same general thesis, him and I, in terms of he's executed orders of magnitude better than I have, but like we think and operate in similar ways. And so I literally bought the Pudgy for the same reason he bought the whole project. I guess that speaks on our current standing at that point, where I bought the one, he bought the whole thing. So kudos to him. But I saw the exact thing. Like I literally would have, I saw it exactly as he did, and that's why he pulled the trigger. People aren't as complicated as we all make them out to be once you start paying attention. And I think that marketers know that better than anything. And truthfully, for better or for worse, in the coming future, the world is going to marketers.
See, that's the thing about Luca. Luca is so people know him from Pudgy Penguins, but Luca's been in this game for a long time. He's a legend in
he's
the
a beast.
Marketing space.
Yes, wholeheartedly. He's such a beast, and his story is amazing. And he's, for a guy who's that successful, he's absurdly humble. And I don't think people realize that. Is like he could be flexing a lot more. He didn't have to come on my show. I didn't have many subscribers, and so at the time, like I knew what I was doing. I kept the Pudgy for a time to get him on the show. Like literally, it was up at crazy prices, and then my girlfriend's like, "Why aren't we selling this right now?" I said, "Wait. Like him on my show is worth more than the bit of money that we would get from selling this right now." And so I maintained it. I actually got her to buy a little Pudgy too, and it all worked out. It's that people are playing different games, and if you don't step back and see the one that you're playing, you don't have the time to look around at what everyone else is doing. And I think Luca gets it at a different level. And I think he understands, because he also has the advantage of, like you already said, he's been around the block. So he also, this is one of the biggest things that I think is, as much as he knows how things work, he also knows how far behind his competition is. Because the more that I grew my agency and the more that I was working with these massive brands, and dude, we're now working with some of the largest companies on the planet. The people that are making the decisions don't know anything. They're so far removed and they're getting so much money. And there are so many people at senior level positions that their job has become convincing everyone that their job is important. And so that makes them incredibly slow, outdated, and he can just make these chess moves around the board that leads to the outcome that he knows they will. They'll look dumb because he's the first to do it. He'll look like a genius a year after it.
Right. Yeah, man. Like, I just want to talk about him because he's a savage. I had crossed paths with him back in like 2017. He doesn't really know who I am, I don't think, but in the e-commerce game. So back in the day, what he was doing and what a lot of people were doing was like working with these influencers. And basically, from what I could see from the outside, he had connected these influencers to these massive brands.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
And so he like just was seeing from way back, like how the internet and all of this was this attention economy and how to monetize it. And so, you know, that's really it. He really has a strong grip on that psychological perspective of how are people interacting with the internet? How are they transferring their value over the internet? And, you know, to see him launch that project was like, oh, okay, this guy is like taking it all the way there. And it's really cool to see.
The biggest skills that he has is something that I try to be there with him. That I think it's one of my best skills. He's better at than I am, but it's spotting opportunities of underpriced attention for the business outcome off of it. And also being willing to look dumb, understanding that you're just parked there before the attention is coming. And so that is really like the skill that will make them so successful, is that when you understand social the way that he does and the way that I would argue I do, you're able to know the conversations that will be had 6 months from now because you understand how the people think that are going to spread it. Right. And so that's given me a massive advantage where I build my software products around the conversations that I know people will have on my behalf. Right. If you look at like the biggest amount of wealth in social media has become a thing, it's whoever can create the most amount of free employees that don't realize they're free employees. That's literally the whole game. Look at meme coins. Look at TikTok. TikTok created a sea of near free talent. Like, people don't realize they go on there and they make a video and all they get is some likes and some admiration, and they even get negative things, but they're still addicted to it and they keep supplying TikTok's business. The information age has really just created who can most effectively get people to spread a message for you. So there's skill in that. You have to make it one that you know the messengers can relay, because if you make the message too difficult for the people who can spread it to say it, they just won't. If you confuse people, you lose people. And so sometimes you have to manufacture an easy to spread conversation, and Luca does that better than anyone I've ever met.
Wow.
Yeah, Luca's a beast, man. Luca's an absolute legend. But with crypto stuff, I'm really hoping that he gets to have more of these conversations. And it seems like even like Washington is talking to him more and more. I heard him on a podcast. And it seems like he's having conversations shaping how these rules are going to be governed. And so that's crazy. That's amazing for me to hear. But for the crypto report in general, because I know that people are seeing these headlines everywhere. Can you dive me into that, what you learned from that?
Yeah, sorry. So
no, you're good.
In that report, they basically broke down a lot of the different key aspects of the infrastructure that are going to be needed to bring all of these things to the forefront. And one of the things that I put in the most recent video that I thought was the most important was oracles. And so essentially, when you have these blockchain systems, you have these siloed ecosystems. So you have one blockchain that has all of the data and all the wallets on that blockchain. And then you have another blockchain that has all of the information and data about that blockchain on that blockchain. But you need to have a way for these different blockchains or databases, systems, whatever you want to look at it as, to communicate with one another. And these decentralized oracles allow you to have a way where you're not relying upon one specific counterparty to get information from one place to another. And that concept is one of the things that is the most important thing happening in blockchain and cryptocurrency, because I'm just going to do a quick rundown. You had the first iteration of blockchain, which was Bitcoin and this concept of proof of work. Okay, great. The second thing that you had was Ethereum and the concept of a smart contract. The third iteration in my eyes that I thought was the most important that happened was this invention of an oracle, where now you can get data from the outside world into a smart contract. And now from there, you can actually have like real world applications for this technology that aren't just about little blockchain, ecosystems. Now this can interact with the real world. So them touching on that and also specifically using a graphic from a company or a project called Chainlink, I thought was pretty massive. Another thing that was in there was real world asset tokenization, which is something that I've been familiar with for quite some time. I worked in it professionally. So to see this once again from the White House is like, holy moly, we spent years trying to like work around all the different ways that we could like get these security tokens onto a blockchain. And now they've mentioned Ondo Finance as one of the providers that are actually doing this in real time and talking about how this is the future of tokenization and what's happening in financial market infrastructure. Those are two key things. They even talked about DeFi. They had a graphic from Uniswap in there. Those were some of the key things. They talked about taxation, which is a very big deal because we've got to get the taxation figured out. If I'm using a stable coin and I'm getting taxed for transferring that to another stable coin, then that's, just not the right way that we're trying to go about this. So we have to figure out the rules around stable coins versus cryptos. And then is it property or is it a currency and stuff like that? And it seems like they're trying to accelerate the path. And it's crazy because every day now there's something coming out from the SEC, the CFTC, or the FDIC, or the OCC about clarifying the rules of the road. And now they have a full roadmap for what that looks like.
It's insane. And they're truly sprinting through this stuff. And I'm sure, like you said, they've been working on it in the backgrounds for years, or I'm sure there's a lot more thought that went into this, but it certainly seems from an outsider's perspective that they're sprinting through this, which is pretty crazy.
I mean, regardless, right, for them to every day be like putting out updates about this is, all of their efforts and all of their time is being spent on this. If you're looking at the SEC, I'm like, I bet there's people getting scammed out there somewhere because like they're only working on crypto.
Man, it's very true. It's insane that all these things are happening. And I tweeted this the other day, but people are just, they so default towards negative and scarcity and fear that we're getting news that we couldn't have begged for 4 years ago on a daily basis, and people are still bearish. And I'm like, what is wrong with you, man? Like, you're crazy. You're someone who like, it can be sunny outside and you're complaining about something. Like there's always something going on. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Stablecoins, you mentioned, that's one thing that obviously Trump is very pro stablecoins. Can you explain what a stablecoin is? And then why is it so important to America? Why are they very pro stablecoin right now?
Right. So the stablecoin is just essentially a tokenized version of a dollar. And the way that it actually works is that you have the stablecoin issuers who will go out, and what they do, they act like, imagine like a bank, where all they're doing is they're buying US treasuries. Now, when they buy those US treasuries, they now have essentially inventory where they can take they can create a digital version, a tokenized version of a dollar based upon the fact that they have these treasuries backing those digital tokenized dollars. I think so what makes a stablecoin unique compared to just a normal digital dollar is that it's actually on a blockchain. It's being issued on a blockchain for the most part. And because it's issued on a blockchain, you have a digital tokenized version of a dollar on a blockchain, which allows you to have frictionless access to these dollars and movement of these dollars. So you could send now this US dollar, imagine USDC is one of the biggest stable coins, the second biggest. And you could now take this USDC and you could send it to someone in Libya, imagine, and send it over a blockchain rail so that now instead of having to pay the fees that the bank would charge you or that some other money service provider would charge you, you're just going to pay whatever it costs to transfer value on the blockchain itself. And so this is completely changing the way that money moves around the world, because this is a much faster, cheaper way to do it, because also it's faster. So now certain blockchains can settle that transaction within seconds. Ethereum might take a little bit longer. I'm not going to lie to you, but there's other blockchains that can get it done faster. And so that's rewiring just all of global payments flows on its own, and speeding up the flow of capital around the world, which that alone can just change a lot of things for the way that the financial system works. I hope I answered the question.
No, completely. But Trump in particular does. So you mentioned earlier that people are less willing to buy the global bond market is being impacted by that. Is that not another byproduct that this benefits from? Like the fact that they have to buy these essentially to issue their stable coins?
Right. So why is the U.S. Potentially pushing this forward so much faster? Okay, so the GENIUS Act that was just pushed through is a stablecoin regulation legislation. And in that legislation, what they said was that for stablecoins that are being issued here in the States, they need to be backed 1-to-1 with U.S. Treasuries, short-term U.S. Treasuries. Okay, and so one of the biggest issues that we've been seeing across the board in the United States is that the demand for our treasuries, as we mentioned earlier, is starting to go down because of the fact that our debt to GDP is so high, and lenders are worried about whether or not the U.S. will actually be able to pay down its debt, or at least improve that situation as far as debt to GDP. So there's a chance that a part of this legislation and this rush to get stable coins and so on into the picture has to do with the fact that there's been a dwindling demand for U.S. Treasuries. And so what this does is it provides a new route, a new demand for U.S. Treasuries, and it also provides a global demand for U.S. Treasuries from day one, because now anyone in the world can buy a stable coin, right, and use a stable coin that must be backed 1-to-1 by U.S. Treasuries. So now these are short-term treasuries, so it providing demand for the short-term treasury could impact the long end of the curve, meaning longer-term bonds. But for sure, even just getting any sort of revenue in, right, based upon these stable coins could be massive, because if the crypto market grows now, right, and the demand for these stable coins grows, then that's going to massively increase the demand for U.S. Treasuries.
Completely, yeah. It's definitely a massive thing, and it seems tied to the urgency that they have attached to this. With Bitcoin, I know that one of the first figures that people think about when they hear about Bitcoin in particular is Michael Saylor and Strategy. Are you well versed in that whole space, like him and the company?
I'm not super versed in it.
Okay.
I'm not super versed in it.
Okay, no worries. I was just gonna get you to explain how they make money to people, but I'll save that for somebody else. So why are so many of the global elites, in terms of these institutions like your BlackRocks, your Vanguard, why are they now aggressively buying crypto, primarily Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Yeah, I mean, the why aspect of that would be hard to say. I think when we look at the flows of the ETFs, we see a lot of inflows and we see a lot of outflows. I personally don't track that stuff very closely because I'm not too concerned with exactly what they're doing. It's like, yeah, they're going to buy, they're going to come in, and that's all that matters. And on top of that, what I would say is, like, it's easy to focus on that. I almost could see that as a complete distraction. So they're buying Bitcoin and they're buying Ethereum and so on. But what I'm most concerned with is the tokenization efforts that they have. They launched earlier this year. They announced that BlackRock specifically was launching a tokenized fund. And I'm more curious about that. And I'm more curious about the infrastructure behind that. Because the way it seems to me that there are different opportunities for investors around what it is exactly that they're doing with their infrastructure and how it is that they're tokenizing these securities. Because you got to think, BlackRock manages trillions and trillions of dollars. So I'm more concerned with what are they doing with that trillions and trillions of dollars than, them moving a couple of billion into Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So from looking into that, or the thought that you've had around that subject, what conclusions have you come to, or potential conclusions?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that there are institutional players that have been specifically building out rails for the settlement of tokenized securities. And so I'm looking at those companies, what role they could play in this process, and what that could look like in the future. So here's what I would say publicly here is, like, you have these companies that have, they've spent the last 10 years building out private blockchains. So there's private blockchains that are usually permissioned blockchains, and then you have public and permissionless blockchains. You also have an intermediate step, which is called a public permissioned blockchain. And so what the public permissioned blockchain is essentially a hybrid between the two, where you have, Bitcoin is the public permissionless and Ethereum and all that. And then you have these private blockchains from places like what used to be Hyperledger. I don't even know if it still exists anymore. And then Corda and stuff like this. And what they're doing is eventually what's going to happen here is that all of the transactions that have been happening on these private blockchains are potentially going to find their way onto these public permissioned blockchains. And the reason that they might want to be able to do that is because inside these internal systems, there's only so much value that they can actually get out of using these private systems. What I think is going to be the most powerful thing that we could see is that by opening up these private transactions to a public permissioned network, you can now involve the end users of these transactions, and they could now contribute to the value of the overall ecosystem that you've built out. So, this is where like tokenization of something is kind of really, really interesting, because you start to think about, okay, if I have a token, then what that really means is that the public, if I have a publicly traded token, then that means that the public can participate in the valuation of that asset. And so when you have something in a private ecosystem, it's fine, but only we're going to be able to value these tokens if they exist only in a private blockchain. But if I can allow other people to contribute to that valuation process, that could actually create value. It could be that now that there's millions and millions of people that are vying for these assets, that could actually increase the value of this entire network that's been built out, but just hasn't been made available to them as far as like how they'd like to participate in the valuation of that network. Does that kind of make some sense?
Makes total sense. Yeah. And I think the real eye-opening moment happens when you get to past that level of, I don't know if it's fear or confusion, where you then start to zoom out and think about, wow, this can be applied to everything. Like there's so many different ways in which money changes hand currently that it can be done in a more optimal, more secure, or a faster way through either current day blockchain technologies or the natural evolution of those technologies. And I'm sure if you're hearing Keith talk, and if you've heard all the things that we've talked about, like this stuff it's coming in a very major way. And I also think that people discredit what you talked about earlier about how hard these people have had to fight just to exist, and the kind of impact that has in slowing the progression of these technologies. So what we're seeing today, while it's obviously a marvel of technology given today's standards, had the regulatory bodies not been so restrictive on these people, I'm sure we would be seeing things that were way light years ahead in terms of progression and real world application. The rules just weren't there. And so now that that's here, and also with the convergence of AI access, I just think this stuff's going to be a rocket ship going in many different directions, but I think they're all going to be going really fast. And so
yeah.
I go ahead.
And I want to touch on that too, because like, I always thought about it like this too. In some ways, it's like, okay, Gary Gensler, like slowing this down. It's like, technically, that's a good thing. Now, it's a good thing, obviously, for the super rich people who want to continue to accumulate these assets, but also to spread awareness before it's too late.
That's a very good point.
Maybe there's part of it where it's like, we don't want to lock people out so bad that, we're trying to slow it down and allow them to figure out what's going on. Sorry. Just wanted to interject on that.
No, please always do that whenever we're talking. And in the future, when you come back on, I'm going to ask you to come back on it because this was awesome. But dude, that's a very good point, that maybe I'm too cynical in my approach to things, where I had never even considered that that's a potential reality. I was just like, these guys are suppressing it. They're doing it on purpose, but maybe it's for a positive outcome. I'm sure people aren't just inherently all evil. So there's probably a degree of that. But for the people who are listening to this, if you're still here, there's no way that you're not intrigued by crypto, and you're at least crypto curious is the term that I like to associate with these people who aren't nerds like you and I in this subject. Where do they start their journey? Because when you and I started learning this stuff, the content was scarce, and it was also done by people that were kind of hard to watch or read or listen to, right? Like it was very select. They were incredibly intelligent, but presenters, they were not, right? And so now there's so many more choices. And as soon as this stuff starts picking up, there's going to be so many more. And so how does someone pick who to listen to and spot people that you may not want to?
Yeah. Oh man, this is such a concern right now, because everyone's coming into the market and they're like hearing about, like, for instance, people are like XRP to $1,000, and I'm like, oh no, like that's going to set people up for a really bad time if we go through another bear market here. But anyways, I think that's the biggest thing to look out for is like people who are just giving specific price predictions. Like if I ever do that, it's probably a bot. So it's not me, but I think that's the big thing, man. Like people who are talking about the technology and how it works, which I'm going to be honest, there's people who come on and they really do the research and they really just present the research. And that's the stuff that I think is the most important, because right now, the things that everyone's looking at is not what's necessarily going to be in the future. It's what's right now. And so you want to look at what people are doing as far as the research and like really looking at the underlying mechanisms of how all this technology works. I think that's the biggest opportunity here, is to understand the technology, because everyone's still worried about the price action and the tokens. And it's the biggest distraction from, once again, like BlackRock, tokenizing all of their securities and settling all of their securities using potential cryptocurrency rails. Like that's massive. And if you dig down that rabbit hole and you really look at what they're doing, you might find a generational opportunity there that has not come yet. So I would say just avoid the people that are talking about price action. If everything's about what's happening on the charts, or even if they sit there and talking head, just talking about prices and how it's going to revolutionize, it's like, well, and I'm not bashing those people. What they're doing is also important. But as someone who wants to learn how to actually take advantage of this opportunity on a generational level, look at the research, look at the technology.
Completely. Yeah. Almost all origins of generational wealth came from being early on the advancement of technology. Like almost every single family that you look into or business that you look into, they were early before everyone realized how big of a deal this was going to be. And this is going to happen. It's not just going to happen once too. So I would also say, don't get too discouraged and feel like you've already missed it, right?
Yes.
Because look at how many ways social media and the internet evolved, right? And how many people didn't get in the game because they thought they were already late. That's not true. And as someone who understands social media the way that I do, I would also say, fight your natural biases as a human to care about social proof. And what I mean by that is, so many people will only watch things that get views because they feel other people associated value and importance to the content that they're consuming. The problem with that on social media is that, much like you just said, is that almost everyone's just talking about price, because if they don't get views. And
right.
So if you are in a place where you feel like the subject matter is more in depth, deeper, a little harder to watch, and it's got way less views, you're probably more likely in the right place than the wrong place. But so many people will skim past these videos because they don't work with someone like me. They don't have a copywriter and a thumbnail designer, and they don't have like a content strategist. So these people who are giving out amazing information get overlooked. And so some of my best videos I've ever watched on YouTube had like 1,000 views. And I think that more people can expedite their growth trajectory by realizing that and figuring out what questions they should even ask, and go find who the people are that actually understand it, and not necessarily who are the best marketers talking about it. I think most of the faces in crypto are just decent creators or decent marketers that are consuming all of the time and attention. And so people think that that's what it is, and they're simply scratching the surface on the reality of it, like you said. And real wealth will come from that. But that stuff's not as easy. Right? Like, so how does someone go and even start getting to the point of asking the right questions? Because that's so intimidating. I'm thinking back to how many hours I put into this. How would you suggest someone starting today?
Okay, here's what I did. And I'll just tell you what I actually did. What I actually did is I went to coinmarketcap.com and I went through all of the top 100 projects. I went to their websites, I downloaded their white papers, and I read them.
I did the same thing. I didn't go as hard as I did top 50, so you've got me beat there.
Yeah.
But
that was the goal. I found the thing. I found the thing by doing it. And that's was what changed everything for me. Yeah.
Completely. Yeah, I think I would actually really advocate doing that. And also, I wouldn't say to get a summary from ChatGPT or an AI tool. I don't think you're going to get the level of knowledge that you need. So I recommend doing exactly as Keith did. But the advantage that you have that Keith and I didn't is that when you get stuck, you don't stay stuck. I call ChatGPT the ultimate unstuck machine. And that is truthfully what you can use to expedite your learning. You have such an advantage here if you're listening to this. Like, you guys can learn so much faster than Keith and I did, and have it be such more of an enjoyable experience. And there's actually quality communities around this now. Like, Keith has a community. Back when we were learning about this, we'd have to join these sketchy ass Discord groups or like Telegram groups, and that were people trying to rip you off everywhere. Like, it was such a minefield of knowing where to go. There's a lot more resources out there if you use the tools the right way. And Keith just gave you golden. Go to coinmarketcap.com. And for those of you that really care, you're going to do this. I want you to deeply go through each of the, well, I'll give you a break. Let's say the top 20 and do all of them. Download every information you can from their website, their white paper, whatever it is, and just understand, because then it's going to guide the next questions that you ask. And with the access of information, man, you can just get this thing rolling so fast.
Yeah. Yeah. If you go through the top 20, you'll have such a better grip on the space. Like
Completely.
You'll understand like what is actually happening just by doing that.
Easily, 100%. And you mentioned earlier before we got into this, because I know we've gone pretty deep into crypto, is that you're working on a new project that's going to be offered to less people. What is that? What are you working on? Give me that whole spiel.
Yeah. So essentially, some of the deeper stuff that we were just talking about like these private permissioned blockchains and the public permissioned stuff like that. In that, there's a lot of gold that I don't necessarily publicly share, because I have spent years gathering the research and understanding exactly what's happening here, and I've found a generational opportunity that I am now packaging up for people to be able to come and participate in. So for the people that either have the resources and just don't know what's going on, or that know that this is a generational opportunity and are looking for the right way to go about it, I basically just created this program where people can come in, take advantage of the resources that we put together for them, make sure that they're actually set up on a longer term for how to take advantage of this, as far as how they're looking at their legacy planning and things like that, and make sure that they fully have a comprehensive plan for how they're going to navigate this digital asset landscape moving forward. So that's what that program is mostly about. The primary thing being this research, because there's people out there. Here's something we didn't talk about, but that you did touch on, is like the richest people right now aren't paying attention to this because they're rich and they don't have to. And because of that, the people who are either just not comfortable and have resources, or at least that are super scrappy and are doing whatever they can to get involved, like those are the people that are going to take advantage of these opportunities and create generational, and I'm talking about multi-generational wealth. And so that's what this program is for those people who have the resources, who know that what's happening is huge. And I'm giving you the actual answers on a silver platter. So that's what it is.
Is that live now, or are you still working on that?
I'm still working on it. It'll be live within a week.
Okay, cool. So by the time this is live, this will be live. I'm going to try to get this live as soon as possible. So if it's not live when you're watching this, come back in a few days and it will be there. The links to both the things mentioned, so Keith's group, that's more of your entry level thing, will be linked down below. And then for the people who are serious, that really have the resources to do this, that will also be linked. And one thing I would say is that regardless of where you're coming to this from, starting is the most important part, because your path towards accumulating information is what will dictate where you go. And every day that you delay, you're missing out, because with the tools that we've talked about, with the access to information in AI, those that start, they get going so much faster. And so the gap just gets wider and wider and wider every day that you don't start. So whatever means you have currently, if that's free, if that's zero, start with stuff like this. Do the things that we've said that are completely free. If you have a tiny bit of money, invest into something cheaper like the group coaching. Start there, because you'll see the positive things that happen, and then you'll become obsessed and you won't even remember who you were before you started.
Absolutely, man.
Hell yeah, man. Keith, this has been awesome.
It's that first step.
That's it, man. This has been awesome. This did not disappoint. I was super excited for this all week. So this was absolutely amazing. Where can people connect with you more before you come back on the show again, of course?
Yeah, I mean, definitely check me out on YouTube at Keith D. Right now I have, my website is keithdmedia.com. So that's there for now. And then, reach out to me via Instagram at Keith D Media, and I'm happy to connect.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks so much, Keith. I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure everyone listening to this appreciates you too. All the links to everything Keith has mentioned will be in the description box or the show notes of this pod. Go show his rocket ship of a YouTube channel some love and help get it some additional space there, because he's cooking and there's a reason for it. So thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate you tremendously.
Dude, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Of course, man. We'll have you on again soon.